There was an accusation that came out, I believe, last April, a year ago, April, if I'm not mistaken. And a woman, Tara Reid, she worked for Joe Biden as a staffer in '93, if I am not mistaken. And as of April of last year, the accusation was that he had inappropriately touched her. It was sort of like, more or less consistent with, you know, other things that people have said about Joe Biden. He's, he gets in their space. Maybe he like decided to see how soft their hair was or weird stuff like that, or smelling them. And so there was a story that came out from The Intercept earlier this week that said apparently at the beginning of this year, I think it was at the beginning of this year, she went to the group, now escapes me. What is it? What Time's Up, which was the sort of a group set up by a lot of people associated with Hollywood, I guess, to deal with the Me Too problem that exists in that industry, and presumably all industries, right? It was a way of basically saying, we have more resources as actors and within Hollywood than, let's say, a woman working as a maid at a hotel. And so, the idea is that we're going to sort of try and provide support and services for those people. And Anita Dunn is, if I'm not mistaken, like the ED of that, the executive director.
She's managing director of SKD Knickerbocker, but she's also one of the founders. So like,
okay,
keep in mind, she's making it's not just like she's directing the thing. She's making a big chunk of the money from one of the largest, most profitable consulting firms on the Democratic side, SKD. They represent the Time's Up Legal Fund, which is where they're putting the money to defend people who've made accusations against powerful folks. Obviously.
So, Tara Reid,
Dunn, doesn't she work for the Biden campaign as well as she advised Harvey Weinstein, or am I thinking of a different lady?
That's the same, Anita Dunn.
Okay.
Ding, ding, ding.
And, well, I mean,
Bernie Sanders protester on stage in the last.
You cut out a little bit there.
Oh, I said she's also the one who thought that Bernie Sanders was a protester in the last debate, like he was acting like a protester on stage.
That's weird.
Yeah, mask off.
But and she was told, we can't represent you because I guess SDK Nick, well, she works for the Biden campaign. And so they saw that as a conflict of interest, and they decided to not help her out.
Well, I think what they said actually was that it's political because Biden was running for president, and therefore that could jeopardize their NGO status.
Okay, so they rejected representing her, and said it was because it would.
But that's false. They're not going to lose their C3 status if they represent a client who is making allegations against a sitting lawmaker. That's opposite. It's not, especially for, it's not like the organization has a political slant that's anti-democratic. And also who's going to prosecute them? Trump's,
Right. And it's also really hard to say that, Anita Dunn is set this thing up to attack Democratic candidates.
Exactly.
So she was rejected by them. They decided not to represent her, which is, it would be hard to come up with a scenario which more illustrates what that group ostensibly is supposed to do. Mm-hmm. We're here to represent women who are, in particular, might be afraid to come out and might not have the resources because they're going against a powerful man, right? I mean, like this is, I don't know if there's really any daylight at all, like the slightest crack between this scenario and the scenario that presumably they were set up to be. And
they set themselves up after Weinstein story broke. I mean,
right.
That's important. If this infrastructure were in place today and the Weinstein story hadn't broken, and many of the Hollywood folks and the actors and in this organization were the ones who came out with their stories about Weinstein. But if Anita Dunn were the consultant working with this firm and Weinstein came forward, would Anita Dunn say, no, 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 political, because Harvey Weinstein hosts a lot of Democratic fundraisers?
Right. Well, I hope not.
Well,
But it certainly brings, it raises some interesting questions. And so Tara Reid went on Katie Halper's show the other day and uh, made new allegations, which basically involve that Joe Biden essentially penetrated her with his fingers, and it was not welcome to do so, and sexual assault. I mean, I think I don't know, specifically if that constitutes rape, but it sounds pretty darn close to it. If it doesn't in a strict legal sense, but I think it is. And then said something to the effect of like, you're no one cares about you anyways. You're not relevant. As she, attempted to get him off, off of her. That is the allegation. And so, I mean, that's where we are right now. No one, I have not seen it reported by any major news outlet, but to be honest, I haven't been paying too much attention to major news. But it certainly doesn't seem to be garnering much attention outside of that Intercept story about her attempt to go to that organization and get representation. I mean, what I don't know. What do you guys think about in terms of like, how you go forward with something like this?
I think
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jamie.
Well, it's not surprising to me that the mainstream media is refusing to cover this story because we already know that they are in the bag for the Democratic establishment and they believe that Biden will be the nominee and they don't want to hurt his chances. I think there's good faith and bad faith reasons that they're doing this, but it is, bottom line, the wrong thing to do to silence a story like this from a victim of sexual assault.
What do you think the good faith reasons are?
I mean, I'm trying to put myself in the mind of a lib, right? So maybe it's not, I'm not the best person to imagine this, but like they're probably, these people think Biden's going to be the nominee no matter what. And, even a sexual assaulter Democrat is better than, a many times over sexual assaulter Republican.
Well, it's why they can't, it's so hypocritical that they fixed their entire message to Trump's sexual assault as a turning point, what they thought was going to be a turning point in the election in 2016. And it backfired for many, many reasons. But I think, it's just such apparent hypocrisy. And the right wing, of course, is highlighting it right now. I'm just doing a quick little Google search to see who's covered this. And it's picked up in the Washington Examiner, Breitbart, all the. So now, essentially, this is the whole shtick, right? They can now say we lose muscle in our argument when the right wing picks it up. And this has happened with a lot of different, stories that have come out about Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, a lot of Democratic lawmakers. If the left brings it up first and then the right wing picks up on it, for the most part, it just becomes a right wing talking point, and then we get attacked for using right wing talking points, even though it's a very legitimate claim. I mean, in this story, it's been updated on The Intercept by Ryan Grimm. It says in the piece that that she went forward to her brother, her mother, and a friend who worked in Senator Ted Kennedy's offices about the incident at the time in 1993. So, there's like some real stuff.
Well, there's concurrent. I mean, the mother, her mother is dead. Is my understanding. But I don't know if Grimm at that point has he confirmed with those two people that they said that. But if so, look, concurrent reporting is, I mean, this rises to the level of sort of evidentiary for full on prosecutions. This is that is one of the things that prosecutors look at. Like, did that person at the time not 20 years later, tell somebody. But at the time, did they tell people about it? And if they did, that carries a significant amount of weight. Now, I haven't seen any statements from those two people
They
yet. They
said,
may
there's an update here. It says that Reed's friend was asked to remain anonymous to not be part of the public pushback, but she said that she discouraged Reed from coming forward at all, concerned that she would be attacked and would never get an apology she was hoping for. Reed and her brother, Colin Moulton, both said that their mother urged her to call the police, but her brother urged her to move on instead. Quote, I did not encourage her to follow up. I wasn't sure of her better advocates. I wasn't one of her better advocates. I said, let it go, move on. Guys are idiots. Moulton now lives in Georgia, said he voted for Gary Johnson in 2016 and has no intention to vote for either Biden or Donald Trump. So, there's a little bit here.
Were they addressing the new allegations or the
at the time? So from
what we don't know which, because she's introduced more serious allegations and we don't know which one of those they are. And
I thought that she told them at the time about this more serious thing. No,
I don't know. That's
what it says in this piece at the update. At the time, she told her. So it says, Reed has given an interview with podcast host Katie Halper describing her time in Biden's office, and she described a sexual assault in 1993. At the time, she told her mother, brother, and friend she worked.
Okay, so that sounds like the allegations that she said on Katie's show. She did relate to those people. This is the thing that I find a little bit frustrating about this. And Nomi, are you frozen? Is Nomi frozen? I think we sort of lost Nomi there, but what from my perspective, oh, there she's back. Look, this is the idea that that people are bringing this up, and any critique of Joe Biden at this point is perceived as doing the right wing's work. But the reality is that this is very difficult, I think, for the right wing to make operative. And if the constituents on if Democratic constituents don't care about this, it's not something that the right is going to be able to operationalize in the same way that I think that they could for corruption or not. It just shows a tremendous amount of hypocrisy by all these organizations that would presumably be far more interested in this if this was, I don't know, Mitt Romney or Donald Trump for that matter. Now, Donald Trump has paid, as far as I can tell, zero price for the 20 some odd allegations, including a rape allegation of on his part. But that I don't know why that seems to be relevant.
You want to look back in history. We had prominent feminists making excuses for Bill Clinton, despite his many, many allegations of sexual harassment and full-on rape. So it really doesn't surprise me that members of the Democratic establishment would be showing their asses again and demonstrating that their interest in feminism is hollow and opportunistic.
I want to hear what Kristen Gillibrand has to say about this one.
Yeah. It is, the thing is that, and to the extent that anybody had any excuses then, which I don't think they did, but there is a doctrinally now, a lot of people have basically, pronounced that, it is necessary, to believe the victim at the very least, enough to really investigate it.
Right.
And, I don't think that I don't interpret that, and I don't think people should, is like automatically assume that the person did it, but you should investigate these claims enough to be able to, sort of say like, we've investigated it. And, that would mean go and talk to those people who, the brother. Go and talk to the friend. There should be someone else who's, there's some of these organizations should be doing this. And
Well, why
I
would they do that when they could convince all of their MSNBC brain viewers that this is just a Russian op?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if they can, then I guess that's why they wouldn't. But I mean, it's, and I understand people saying like, Donald Trump is, we need to get rid of Donald Trump. I agree, but if you're going to eliminate like the a huge swath of the reason why people have a problem with Donald Trump, I think you're in sort of like weak ground.
He has
Uh,
a real Biden has to pull in two constituencies that he has done absolutely nothing to pull in at this point. And one is, of course, progressives, or basically people under 50. And the other is women. I mean, there's been, I was at a meeting,
Oh.
um, well,
I think I know where she was going with this. Look, if they think that this is not going to become an issue in the general election, if they think Trump's not going to go there, they've got another thing coming. Trump, as we've said on this show many times in the past, does not need to show that he's morally superior to Biden. He just needs to show that Biden is just as bad as he is and a hypocrite to boot, right? He needs to drag him down in the mud with him, which will be very easy to do considering that he has a very credible accusation of sexual assault against him. I mean, Biden is running on his character, right? And on restoring quote unquote decency to the office of the presidency. And I think he's very vulnerable on that. It's going to depress turnout for sure, especially among women, like Nomiki was just starting to say.
yeah, I mean, I don't know for sure. I mean, there's been an ability, it seems to me, to ignore all of this with Biden, but yes, it's something that I would imagine, if not Trump, at least Trump allies are going to try and push and target women and say that Joe Biden is, has this record of at the very least, well-known inappropriateness and perhaps, what constitute as rape. And so, yeah, I think it's a huge liability for Biden. It's also just sort of, it really undercuts the moral authority of these organizations that ostensibly, fight for this stuff. I mean, that's part of the reason why Biden has been, I think, so problematic amongst people. You don't have to be to the left of Biden to make an assessment that he is a liability in the general election on some level. And, I don't know, maybe um I don't know. But
Yeah.
Nomi just texted me. She said our brand new internet just went out completely. I have no idea what's going
Oh,
on.
no.
Might be in the area. So okay. Wow.
Well,
The internet's breaking. But all right. Well, I mean, I don't know what else there is really ultimately to say. I mean, obviously that there needs to be, I'm sort of surprised that we're not seeing any, well, maybe I shouldn't be, but any institutions out there taking this allegation seriously enough in which to, at the very least, investigate it and, sit down with the Tara Reid and, see if the story is credible. I mean,
well,
uh,
I think it goes back to what we've been talking about all along about how what's happening in this primary shows the fundamental lack of independent working class institutions that people trust in this country, right? That's why we're seeing a lot of the results that we're seeing. And I think it's becoming more apparent than ever that the media at large, not counting alternative media like ourselves, is fully captured by the Democratic establishment.
yeah, I mean, there's, I don't know how else you can explain I mean, I don't know about the, the lack of a working class, of movement is relevant in this instance. I mean, if Cory Booker was the only person left in the campaign, I think you'd still have the same problem. But certainly the media has a reluctance the mainstream media has a reluctance to go after Biden on this now. Part of my concern is that it's quite possible that they're going to find their conscience in September. And that would be more consistent with what we've seen from the media, right? I mean, that is, we saw that in the context of Hillary's emails, right? I mean, of all the things to critique Clinton on, it was the emails that dominated, and it was the least relevant of any of it. And so, I don't know if it is. I think at this juncture they are hesitant to go after him on this, but I'm not convinced. And frankly, that's what my from a losing to Donald Trump perspective, right? I mean, putting aside the hypocrisy and the idea that this should be. All right, here's Nomi back. Putting aside,
I think Trump's going to make it.
Let me finish.
Story. Sorry.
Well, Trump can make it into a story, but my concern is that and Trump can, there can be Facebook ads targeting people, putting aside, of course, like, the failure and the hypocrisy of these institutions to address this. It's also quite possible that this media that is not bringing it up now is going to be more than happy to bring it up in September and in October. I mean, it's out there. They're all aware of it now.
Yeah.
And, Donald Trump is not, nobody thinks that Donald Trump is a credible messenger, but like you say, he could make an issue of it and then they're going to start to talk about it.
Absolutely. And, half of the states haven't voted yet in the primary, right? This seems like the kind of thing that people would or should want to consider when choosing a candidate to go up against Trump.
But I mean, maybe I'm just cynical, and Nomi, you can weigh in on this too if you can hear us.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Some of the biggest critics of Joe Biden have come from some of the loudest feminist voices. Rebecca Traister, for instance, has been, came out with one of the earliest and I think one of the most comprehensive critiques of Biden in this way, and more or less ignored.
Yeah.
We've, well before the voting, like more or less ignored by all the same people that we're talking about are ignoring this now.
I think they're making a conscious decision, and this might be a little controversial to say, but I think they're making a conscious decision to trade in the white working class man for the feminist, or vice versa, the feminist for the white working class man. And it was essentially, it's the opposite strategy of Hillary Clinton. I don't think it needs to be either or. I think you have to have both, just like Bernie needs to have, young woke millennials and, factory workers in the Rust Belt. You need to have both. And that's ultimately the problem the Democratic Party has. They don't know how to balance these all working people. They're very good at having mixes of them and the professional class, but they're not very good at understanding diverse working class, multi-generational voting bloc. And, Joe Biden, I think, there is some truth that the Rust Belt voters may not connect with, extreme feminist language that, we believe in. You have to be able to speak their language and say, well, would you want your wife treated this way if they want to?
I think that it's very likely that there are some, advisors to Joe Biden. I don't know if they're saying it to Joe Biden's face, but when they're sitting around the table, they're going like, for every, Rebecca Traister and Nomi Key Const and Jamie Peck we lose, we're going to pick up 4 guys, who are, working, working construction in Wisconsin.
Well, honestly, they might be right about that. Like we saw with the utter failure of the Warren campaign, there just aren't that many of those people out there. Like I was actually surprised. I had a certain stereotype in my mind of the professional class, probably because of being raised with so many, nice, well-intentioned left liberals who sincerely care about feminism, even if I think their analysis is a little incomplete. But like most of the people in that income bracket don't really care that much about feminism. They don't really care about progressivism. They're going to vote for Joe Biden. Before, I was like, well, no, I don't think these professional class people are going to jump in a coalition with working class Democratic voters because they find Biden embarrassing, distasteful, anti-feminist, all that. I think what the failure of the Warren campaign has showed is that these people are not as substantial a voting bloc as we thought they were.
I don't know about that. I think what it is I think that they're feminists, but they're not feminists first. They vote with their pocketbook just like everybody else does, just like the factory worker does, just like, we do. Rebecca Traister makes her money making the feminist case. Now, she believes in it just like we make our money making the progressive case. But if they're working on Wall Street, they're not going to vote against their pocketbook because the alternative is Bernie Sanders. I mean, Rebecca Traister was basically at the point where she was ready to vote for Bernie Sanders, which is like, mind blowing.
I'm not as surprised by that, but because I think Bernie Sanders was always her number two.
Yeah,
that doesn't surprise me. But the point remains. I mean, I think you're right. I think there's just not. My contention has always been that misogyny is much easier. People are much more comfortable with casual misogyny in this country than just about any other type of discrimination.
Absolutely.
Broadly speaking.
But we have to understand, like, people might care about this issue in the Democratic primary base. That's not all of America, but it's not their number one issue. See what I'm saying?
I mean, that's the problem with gun control.
Yes.
Everybody's like, you can get 60, 70%, 80%. I'm for responsible gun control. How often do you vote on that? Well, that's actually the sixth thing that comes into play when I cast my vote. And if there's, any of 1 through 5 will override that one. And that is the, people forget. They'll look at the poll. I mean, this primary is a perfect example of it. 65% of the people decided to vote not based upon agreement on the issues. It was just voting on who they thought or they had, been told can beat Donald Trump. And so, the primary is a perfect example of that. Like, I'm willing to put, and I'm not convinced that isn't, there's no way to ever prove that allegation, right? There's just no way. And it is, it's certainly, I haven't heard any other allegations that are that serious, but it's not inconsistent with, at the very least, Joe Biden being somebody who sort of felt like, there's no difference between my space and other women and women's bodies. I can, if my face lands in their hair, that's what I want to do. But you're never going to get conclusive evidence or proof of it. And so I think it becomes easy for people to just say, like,
I think we also have to keep in mind that when these stories come up, it is far more likely that a Democratic lawmaker, if story is given oxygen, is to be canceled than a Republican lawmaker. You've seen countless numbers of Republican lawmakers just
Al Franken
in a minute. Rightfully so, Schneiderman. But they suspend their campaigns. They step down immediately. Whereas Republicans, it really, it's hit or miss. You've got outrageous allegations against multiple Republicans in office right now across the country, but because their base doesn't care as much about these issues, believe them. They don't believe the mainstream press. I mean, part of it is just this ecosystem of how the press works with each voting population. And if the Washington Post is not covering this, then it's not an issue for Democratic voters.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not feeling terribly optimistic about this in terms of the Democratic Party's response. I think they've already shown that they're willing to bet all of their chips on somebody that they already know has serious issues. So
right.
I'm not really sure what could happen that would change that at this point.
All right. Well, I'm going to